a lot of my anger or outlash or frustration towards you is thinking, why can't you just be more like me in this way, that way?
Sometimes people just need to hear, like, I'm sorry, I've hurt you.
You taught me a lot about the way that I do want to live my life. Oh my God, what is my sister gonna think of me? And what if she rejects me?
You kind of came across as more judgmental.
I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted to find understanding. Welcome to another episode of the Co-Elevate podcast. I have my older sister, Allie, on today, and believe it or not, she is 12 years older than me. This is the craziest story, but my parents decided in a therapy session when my sister was 11 years old that they felt something was missing in our family, which was me, the third child. So, Allie, I don't know if you want to share a little bit about what your experience was as an 11-year-old when I came into the picture. Were you excited, nervous, a mix of both? How did you feel, just briefly?
Oh, I always wanted a sister. I was very clear about that. I even asked Mom and Dad, could you please just have another baby? But it has to be a girl. I have to have a sister. So yes, of course, when they said they were having a baby, and at the time, they never found out what it was, me being there at your birth, and I got my wish. It's a girl. I have a sister. It was wonderful.
Well, I feel like that's every sister's dream, is to have another sister in their family. And I think there's a lot of, girls and women out there who wished they had a sister growing up. So I definitely feel really blessed to have you in my life. And today you and I are going to be covering just the sister dynamic and the ups and downs of being sisters. I know that everybody runs into their challenges with their siblings, and we are definitely not exempt from that, even though we do have a pretty significant age gap. The first thing I want to say is just that even though you're from the same family, it doesn't mean that you are going to be exactly like your siblings or that you have to be like your siblings. There's so many sisters out there who are totally different from each other. And Allie and I feel like are pretty similar, but we definitely have some pretty big differences between us, which we'll get into a little bit later. But I think there's kind of a misconception that just because you are raised by the same parents means that you and your siblings should be exactly the same. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And especially with the age difference. I, being 11 and growing up with you, I was just entering middle school. It's just a very different time, obviously, in my life, welcoming a new baby. And it was great, but of course, I agree. Like, it's not you're your own person, your own unique self. So, of course, we have similar or some shared experiences being in the same family, but you are your individual self.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of posts on Instagram actually about this whole question that we're getting into at the moment. And what I saw was that the order in which you come into the world in your family really does play a role in, how you grow up to be. Because think about it, a lot of parents, when it's the first and the oldest child, it's their first time parenting. So they might make all their mistakes on the first kid. And when the second kid rolls around, if you're a middle child, maybe the first kid kind of gets left in the dust because the second child is now the center of attention. If there's a third kid, then the second kid is a middle child, and the middle child can sometimes go unnoticed, and the younger child has had parents who have already made mistakes with all the first couple kids. So the order in which you're born into the world, I think definitely, impacts who and how you become later in your life. And I really think there's something to be said about that. If you could just take a minute to think about your own parents and ask yourself, what kind of struggles were they going through when they raised the first child, the second child, the third child, the fourth child, and so forth. I bet their financial situation was different. Maybe they moved to a new house or a new city, or they experienced challenges within their marriage that made them raising their children different. So I just want to bring that topic to light because I think that since I was the last child, the third kid, the youngest, I had a very different childhood and upbringing than you and our brother did.
Sure.
Because you're 12 years older than me. My brother is 15 years older than me. And when I ask my parents today, they tell me that they made tons of mistakes on my sister Allie and our brother Jordan. And by the time I came along, they kind of retired from parenting and they just gave me free reins to do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, which I think has shaped who I've become today.
Yeah, definitely.
Wouldn't you say so?
Yeah, I definitely agree. So I was the baby for so long, and then that changed when you came into the world, and then you were the baby, and it shifted my role too, because then I became, of course, your sister, but also took on like a mothering role as well, and took care of you and did things with you or took you on new experiences, and it definitely changed the whole dynamic. It was a very joyful time and exciting, just we all gushed over you and how cute you were and loved on you. So yeah, it's like a shift in the family's attention.
Exactly. And you were the youngest child before I came into the picture, and you had your own set of challenges that mom and dad had to attend to. And I think when I came into the picture, like you said, you had to become a little more responsible because you oftentimes did take care of me and you stepped in when mom and dad couldn't, and you did take on a parenting role as young as you were. And I think a lot of siblings find that they have no choice but to step into a parental role with their younger siblings because that's sometimes just how it goes in families. And there's a lot of complexities and nuances to that. But I think the reason I'm even bringing this subject up is because I really want to dive into the fact that every child in a family is going to be different from the other, and the goal is not to have your sibling be exactly like you. The goal is to actually learn how to understand them for who they are and do your best to be in a relationship with that person, knowing that who they are might not ever change, and who they are is acceptable and lovable. Because when we're young, our parents and other influential role models in our life often tell us what's acceptable or not acceptable, maybe unintentionally, just by the way they say things or what they do or how they punish us. There's a lot of like subliminal messaging in childhood from our parents or just parent-like figures about, whether certain behaviors are okay or not. And I think siblings sometimes have trouble with understanding like how they fit in and what their role is within the family, especially in relation to their siblings. Like when you were growing up in your teen years, you were super explosive sometimes and reactive and very like expressive with your emotions.
Very much a teenager, yes.
Like the typical rebellious problem child is what they say, right? That's that's what, I know that's not all of who you were, but that's kind of like the label that you had, right?
Yes,
I mean, you can express yourself.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I just, I had a lot of feelings and emotion and felt things very deeply, and, there's just a lot going on all the time. So, yeah. Yeah,
and I was very low maintenance would be the best word to call it, I guess. Allie was a lot more high maintenance, when she was a teenager compared to when I was a teenager. And if you observe your parents and their reaction to your behaviors when you're young, you'll see that they make different comments and the way they handle each child is a little different. And I think like growing up, when you watch your siblings and you see the way they operate and interact, you can kind of come to form your own conclusions about how you want to be and how you don't want to be.
Yes.
And for me, it's kind of hard to say whether this would be true, but sometimes I do wonder if growing up with you as a teenager when I was a little toddler, if I took in some beliefs subconsciously that I would never be a burden, or I would never cause any kind of trouble, or I would never be the child to show my emotions or be chaotic, or whatever words you want to put to it. Yeah, and sometimes I wonder, like, did I create this belief that I would never be like that? And so I became someone who just never reacted about anything, never cried, yelled, like, you know, in my teenage years. So anyway, if you're listening, I just say this because it's important to reflect on like how you think, you know, your siblings' experiences when you were growing up may have shaped you in certain ways. Because for me, I think I formed this belief that it was wrong to be emotional,
Right.
or to be, there's so many words that you could use to put on it, but just to be, I use the word chaotic. I don't know what the best term would be for this. Out of control, maybe. I was afraid to be out of control or to seem out of control. And so I became very logical and analytical and controlled and perfect.
Well, yeah, I'd sneak out of the house, go through windows, try and bring alcohol to school dances, go out with boys. You know, I had a lot of fun, and I just was very spontaneous and did whatever I thought would be great at the time. But yeah, of course, then you are a much more reserved person, and in that sense, that would never be you.
Yeah, I never broke any rules, whereas my sister did a lot. So anyway, we're really different in that way. Allie is very, very carefree and kind of uninhibited in the way that she expresses herself. She's super fun, outgoing, playful, just vibrant, also very sensitive, really empathetic, very attuned, like emotionally. And we share a lot of those things for sure. But I would say that in general, I think that you're just more out of control than I am.
Yeah, I guess that's the word.
Yeah, I don't know a better way to express this. It's kind of hard to put the right words on it and the right explanation.
Maybe from the outside, not looking like everything's all together or put together, or you always, you know, there's no like up and down.
For me.
Right, exactly. Whereas my life is just like, whoa, what's gonna happen this year? Yeah.
Yes, I never lost my sense of direction my entire life. I've always just kind of known where I was going, and I never really fell off track. I never went down bad paths. I never had any like troublesome experiences. Like I can't even think of a single fight I ever had with my parents. I didn't break any rules. I was terrified of the law. I just like was such a by the books, black and white, logical person. And Allie just challenged everyone and everything, and kind of still does to this day.
Yes, I've created my own life, and yeah.
Yeah, so that's a little bit into our similarities and differences. We're both very loving and happy and connected and deep and vulnerable people, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's kind of like the foundation of our relationship, I would say.
Yeah, you're definitely logical and organized and future focused, and you have a plan, whereas I'm just like living in the moment and getting through the day.
Also, I should mention that Allie has 3 kids and she's a single mom. So she has a whole set of circumstances and environmental things going on that affect the way she, you know, is on a day-to-day basis. Also, she has major ADHD. I don't have any of that. So, like, somebody asked me, what's the most annoying trait that you guys recognize in each other? Allie is just like, she's always late. She's always has some problem or issue going on that needs to be fixed or handled. I feel bad saying all these things, but somebody asked us. I don't know. She's just, the word high maintenance is the best word you could give to her. And I don't say that to be rude, but what do you think is the most annoying trait about me?
Not annoying, but like you're very black and white, and like if I ask something or mention something, like you see it in such like a black and white way, and it's like there's no variation from that. Or yeah, so it's just interesting, like the way you perceive things or see things, or yeah, it's different. Yeah.
Yeah, I will definitely say that over the years, we've had different struggles and challenges with understanding each other, for sure. And I've had to learn a lot about how to accept and embrace you for who you are. So I just want to talk a little bit about that. My sister and I actually lived with each other for many years. This was back when I was in high school and a little bit of college. So when you live with someone, you really get to know them, and you notice every little thing that ticks you off about that person. So when I lived with Allie, I really got to experience the highs and lows of her, and I got to see her day-to-day struggles and challenges as a mother. And I think it really, it definitely was a tough time here and there, because I would always have in the back of my mind this frustration, like, why can't my sister just get it together? Why can't my sister keep her emotions to herself, buckle up her bootstraps and just get on with life and like not need anybody to help her? That was my mentality. It was very much tough love, and people probably don't think that I would ever be capable of showing tough love, but I do. And I'm not saying that's the best way to be, but if you are, going to ask me about my flaws or something that I could improve on, it's that sometimes I am not always the kindest, and the way that I communicate may not always be super nice and pleasant. Sometimes I come across as being insensitive, as sensitive as I can be. And so with my sister, when she would have a hard moment and she would freak out, cry, or get angry, back when I wasn't as self-aware, I would get annoyed, like, oh my gosh, here she goes again, she's got to bring everybody along with her. And I had a little bit of like resentment towards you for the way that you were, because I felt like you going through challenges meant including our parents in that, which took away from me. And I just wanted everything to be peaceful all the time. So sometimes you would shake things up, and I would be affected by that. And then because I was affected by it, I would take it out on you, and it would cause me to create distance, with you.
Sure. And I think also, like, going back to the age difference, I think until you're in a certain situation yourself, until you're married, or until you have children, or you're working full time or navigating whatever it is in life, it's hard. Like, you can try and understand someone's situation or where they're coming from, but you really can't fully understand it unless you've also experienced it. So I think, with our big age difference, I've had we've experienced life in very different times. So I think that also was different, because you got to see, married life or having a baby for the first time and all of what that entails. And none of that is smooth. Like, anyone with kids knows that it's chaos. It's wild. It's never just like this straight path. There's many ups and downs, and it's, there's a lot going on all the time. So it's navigating those things, and I think, I've gotten better at like managing those stressors, but for me that was, it's just a challenge, like taking on or being responsible for a lot of things. Yeah, I see where you're coming from in that. especially Shayna's very like more reserved and put together, and like at that time I don't think you were a very like emotional person, or like you kind of came across as more judgmental of like, you know, just like what's going on, or like not really understanding, or
Apathetic.
yeah.
It's true. When I say this was years ago, before I was really aware of like why I was so resistant to my sister. And Allie is right. At the time, I was not an emotional person. If I was sad, angry, any sort of negative emotion, I locked it away and I hid it from everybody. I would not open up to friends, family, or the camera the way that I do now. I wouldn't cry in front of people. I was so different than what you might see me as being online. And my sister was so opposite of me then. She could cry at the drop of a hat in front of anyone about anything and wear her heart on her sleeve and not give a damn. And I saw that as just chaotic messiness that needed to be fit into a perfect little box with a bow on it. So
that's so funny.
I feel like most of my resistance to you came from that difference between us. And what I learned about that is all of my resistance towards you being so emotional was because I suppressed all of my emotions and I didn't allow myself to be open in the way that my sister was. So my sister, being as open as she is, would really get to me because she gave herself permission to be someone that I wouldn't allow myself to be. She gave herself permission to do things that I would never let myself do, like cry in front of people or yell in a fit of anger. And this is super important to know, because if you could think about what it is that annoys you with your sibling, you have to turn it around on yourself and ask yourself, is there a trait about my sibling that I have in me that I don't allow people to see, or that I don't allow myself to experience because I'm afraid of judgment or shame, or because I've put myself in some kind of box that I don't want to get out of because people will disapprove of me? And that could start from the way your parents talked to you as a child, or what they said was okay or not okay. So anything that you see in your sibling that ticks you off, turn it on yourself and say, am I suppressing this part of me such that I'm judging it in this person? Or have I ever been this way, the way that my sibling is? Have I ever been emotional? Have I ever been mean? Have I ever been selfish? Have I ever been late to something? Every action that your sibling has done that has affected you, I'm sure that you have been in their same shoes, or that you want to be in their shoes in some way, but you can't because of your own limiting beliefs. I know, like, I have friends that say, you know, my sister is doesn't care what people think at all. And I'm a super overthinker. And the siblings often fight because one wants to be able to not care what people think, and the other, you know, probably could benefit from being an overthinker at times.
I actually think that relates to us too. I make decisions quickly. I live in the moment. I'm not like planning ahead so much. I just believe everything's gonna work out, and maybe don't look at like the facts of a situation. And those are things that have affected me and choices I've made in my own life that I could have used more pausing and, you know, not being so quick to make such life-changing decisions in my life. But I also truly also don't really care what people think, and I've always like done my own thing and, you know, made my own mistakes, or, you know, however you want to say it. But I think that's the difference of like, I definitely feel like I'm a risk taker in that way, and like trusting and hoping, well, I hope it works out. I'll just do my best and like give it all I've got. But sometimes, it doesn't always work out that way. But that's, the difference, I think, also in our personalities and, like being very spontaneous and impulsive versus not making any decision or not even going after anything, like trying anything or closing yourself off to relationships or experiences out of, fear or, what you make up in your own mind.
Absolutely. One of the things I always noticed about you is it was always really easy for you to ask for help from people. And because you always wore your heart on your sleeve, a lot of people would come to support you. And I never asked for any help, I just was so used to just having my shit together all the time that I didn't even know what to ask for help for. I honestly still don't know what to ask for help on, but I resisted that in you for a long time because I just thought that you should be able to handle everything on your own. And you shouldn't need to ask people for help. Why? Because that's what I did. So I projected what I thought was good and right and acceptable, and I wanted you to fit into that box. And that was a lot of my anger or outlash or frustration towards you, is thinking, why can't you just be more like me in this way, that way? And I think so many siblings feel that way about many different aspects of their sister, or brother or friend or parent. I mean, we're talking about sisters, but this can relate to every one of your relationships. Now, I do not care at all about crying in front of people. I don't care if I seem like a hot mess. I don't care if I don't have my shit together and people know about it. And those are things I never dreamed I would let anybody know or see about me.
Yeah, you're a very private person, I would say.
Was.
It was. Now it's like everything's on social media, her whole life. So, I think it's amazing, actually, because seeing you go from being so closed off or reserved or, worried about what people thought, it didn't allow you to, share all the amazing things that you have to share with the world. And, I think now you've allowed yourself to be expressive in all the ways, and not only has that impacted other people and people relate to you and can understand you and think about their own life and relationships, but I think it's also made us closer too. And I feel like, of course we've always been close, but I've gotten to know you in a deeper way because you're able to share those thoughts and feelings, whereas before it would be a little bit tough to know what you were thinking or what you were feeling or what your thoughts were on things because you didn't maybe trust or allow that part of you to be seen.
Yeah, 100%. What I'm saying is like, my resistance to you taught me so much about what I was hiding in myself, what I was judging in myself, what I felt ashamed to show or share with people. You embodied everything that I never thought I could allow myself to be. And that's what I want all sisters to do, is to really be able to see the gift of your sibling beyond what frustrates you about them, and look to your triggers and look to your resistance and frustrations to actually develop yourself and to heal parts of yourself that maybe you didn't even know needed healing,
Yeah.
Like, I think that with siblings, the big area of concern is comparison. And that this does encompass comparison for sure, because all people have different skills and strengths and personality traits that if other people had, they could benefit from, and we're so quick to determine what traits are bad or wrong and what traits are good and acceptable. And I just want to suggest everybody remove those labels completely, because somebody like my sister who has ADHD and who's chronically late and who's disorganized and who's emotional, you have a lot of wonderful skill sets and strengths that shine through those things. Like, you know, maybe you're more creative as a person, maybe you're better suited for certain roles that I wouldn't be better suited in. Like, I think we have to really do our absolute best to shy away from judging each other and labeling each other, and instead figure out what it is that we can learn from one another. And what traits that do you have that I could embody more of, like your ability to risk take, your ability to be impulsive about things. Maybe I could use a little bit of impulsivity sometimes versus overthinking everything and being so analytical that I'm in my head all the time and I'm controlled and I don't have as much fun as you do. There's all kinds of things to explore there with siblings.
Sure, definitely.
Another thing that I think is related to this topic is the whole subject of forgiveness in families, and knowing that when you're a little kid, all of us have childhood wounds, no matter how perfect your childhood is. With Allie and I, it was a little different because she was so much older than me, 12 years older than me, that Allie was never like mean or abusive or purposefully hurtful towards me when I was a kid. She was literally 11 when I was born. By the time I was 10, she was 22. So she just doted over me my whole life. But I know that for a lot of siblings, they do have experiences where their older sister was mean to them or picked on them, or one of their siblings said hurtful things to them about their appearance or their body or their personality. And, you know, even if you're sitting here thinking, those things don't affect me, I genuinely believe that even at a subconscious level, there are many things that happen in your childhood that have a very significant effect on you in your adulthood and throughout your life. And like, your childhood is really where you come to form your identity based on your upbringing, the way your parents raise you. And so I just want to take a moment to like recognize that for all the sisters out there who may have hurt their younger siblings or their older siblings, you know, just like truly work on forgiving yourself for whatever it is that you said or did with an underdeveloped brain. Because when you're 10, when you're 7, when you're 13 even, like, you're not taught how to be self-aware. You're not taught how to be a conscious sibling and how to have a healthy, thriving relationship with people. You're not taught these things at all. You're not taught maturity. You know, some parents don't actually raise their kids with the resources or the tools or the skills to be able to handle conflict or to just develop into themselves in a confident, with confidence, you know, and clarity and all those things. So if you have a memory of something you said or did to your sibling, chances are you probably didn't mean to be intentionally harmful. And you probably didn't really know better with what you were given, you know? And I'm not saying that your actions or behaviors are necessarily justifiable or are okay. I'm just saying that every human being makes mistakes and every human being hurts other human beings. I will be the first to say, I have said hurtful things to you. I've probably done hurtful things over the years, even as an adult who's self-aware and conscious and has a ton of resources and skills to be the best sister possible. Even I have said and done things that I feel guilty about and that I wish I hadn't said or did. And I just want to make light of that. I don't know if you've ever been in that position as well, but there's a lot of siblings out there who feel bad for the way that they treated their sister, brother, parent, friend, whoever it was.
Absolutely, yeah. I think, yeah, as we go through life, you know, being children, teenagers, adults, we individually go through different experiences, and whether we intend to have like a negative or, you know, an impact, you know, on our family, siblings, that things that choices that we make do affect other people. And I don't, of course not intentionally, because we know we love each other and, would always be there and care for each other. But, there are many times in life that, even I felt like, oh, wow, like, am I being a good example for her? Like, what kind of, I thinking about like you in your life, or you finding, a husband, or having a family, or just being able to look back on, my life or my experiences, and how do you perceive or take away, what do you take away from that? Or how does it affect you even? Or, does that cause you, some, worry or concern or stress? Or have you, make certain decisions based on what I've chosen or experienced? And although, yes, I'm not like responsible for your choices in life, but we do, like, we are family, and we are very, close and involved and connected, and those things do affect, our family. So
yeah, what you're saying is that sometimes you wonder, being the older sibling, if the choices you've made and mistakes you've made have impacted the way that I see my future. Like, you going through troubles in your marriage and going through divorce and picking different partners and having 3 kids, and me witnessing the ups and downs and highs and lows of all of that. You ask yourself, like, am I setting a good example? Am I traumatizing my sister and scaring her out of getting married one day? Or am I scaring her out of having kids? You worry that a lot of the way you've lived your life could scare me off from living mine. And
Sure.
I'm sure a lot of older siblings feel that way, because we even got a question from someone that said, as the older sister, I really struggle with having to, like, set an example for my younger sibling and meet some sort of expectation for her. And a lot of older siblings do feel like they have to be the more responsible one, whereas the younger sibling can maybe be more of a free spirit. And so I'm glad that you brought that point up. But I think, how I see it is like, just because you're an older sibling, I wouldn't want you to have to put yourself on a pedestal for me, because
Right.
we're all just trying to get through
Exactly.
life. We all have shit that we
Yeah.
have to deal
Yeah.
with. And I think it's kind of unfair that just because you're older, or just because you're a certain age, that you should have to pull it together for somebody else.
Right.
I mean, I understand as a parent, you might have to do that for your children who depend on you for food and shelter and all of that. But as a sibling,
Yeah.
I don't really think that that should be the case, at least, because you're not my parent, If anything, I think we look to our parents to be a foundation for us and to be a role model for us.
Yeah.
Now, not everybody has that, and we're very, very blessed that we do have parents that were very responsible and level-headed for our entire lives. But I think, everybody's got a different dynamic in their family that can bring up different challenges.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel that if you are an older sibling who feels like there's a lot of pressure to be the most responsible one and to make all the right and best decisions and to lead the way, pave the way for your younger sibling, I feel like it's okay to kind of let that burden go. And if it makes you feel better, have a conversation with your sibling to just remind them, like, hey, this is all of our first time living life.
Exactly.
Nobody's been here, done that before.
Yeah.
So I don't care how old you are, like, you're doing life for the first time just like me. Our parents are doing life for the first time just like us. So we really need to extend like some grace and some empathy and some forgiveness to all the people in our life who have hurt us,
Yeah.
or who feel, this pressure to show up for us all the time and be perfect.
Yeah, and I think that what's really been great about our relationship, although most of the time I think we're pretty great, but if there ever has been an issue in the past or feelings have been hurt, that we have the ability to talk to each other and just be like, I'm upset that you said that, or, this could have been handled better, or whatever it is, that we can go back and, just own that and say, I'm sorry, and, or I'll do better. What do you need from me? And we can have those conversations. And that's really important. Sometimes people just need to hear, like, I'm sorry, I've hurt you. And I am.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, you've literally never intentionally done anything to hurt me. If whoever doesn't know Allie personally, her best strength is that she couldn't hurt a soul if she tried. She's one of those people that does not have a mean bone in her body, like probably doesn't even know how to define the word mean. And she just has the purest heart and soul of anyone. You do. You have the purest heart and soul of anyone I know. And, that's what I love most about you, and what everybody loves most about you, for sure. Of course, it makes me emotional just because I'm so grateful, that you never, you didn't traumatize me. If anything, you just enriched my life more, and you taught me a lot about the way that I do want to live my life and the future that I want to have. And sure, maybe it was from, some of the mistakes that you've made, but that's a blessing in and of itself, I know that you can see silver linings in mistakes that you've made, but a silver lining is that you have taught me as a younger sibling, and I'm very appreciative of that, for sure. Of course, I wish you didn't have to go through the pain and the struggles that you have, and I wish I could, take that all back from you, but that's your life path, and that's something that you've had to go through for whatever reason that you find for yourself, But I do think that it's so important, like you said, to recognize the harm that you may have caused your sister, even if it was unintentional, and even to ask your sister, have I done anything in the past or recently to hurt you? And if they do share with you something that affected them, that you did, just apologize. It doesn't mean that you agree. You don't have to agree. What you have to do is just empathize with their experience and what meaning they drew from that. I think a lot of times we're afraid to apologize for something that we did or said because we want to be right about our actions, but it's not about being right. It's would you rather have a healthy, relationship with your sibling that's filled with healing and growth and forgiveness, or would you rather be stubborn and right about how perfect you are and put a divider up between you and your sibling? That's what happens when you don't have the humility to look at yourself and to understand that you are also a human that's capable of hurting another person. We all are.
Yeah, this made me think of just a time where it was, I was doing some reflecting on my relationships in my life, and giving my relationships a rating scale between 1 and 10 of where do I stand with this person? Where's my relationship with my sister right now? Between a 1 and a 10. And if, a 10 being the best it could be, if it wasn't there, it's what's missing? What's the difference between getting to where we are now to having this be a better relationship? And that's just talking and being able to be open and share and just say maybe we need more quality time together, or what, I'd like you to listen to me more, or what, it can be anything, whatever it is, but taking those, if you don't ask, you'll never know. You'll never know where you can be better for someone in your life. And I think that's important to, at some point, talk to the people that you love and care about, or your siblings, and just say hey, where do you think our relationship stands today? Do you feel close to me? Is there anything that, you want to say to me, or anything that I've done that I can talk to you about, or whatever it is, just having an open conversation and doing things to improve your relationship. It's important.
Yeah, you're basically saying to take inventory of your relationships and to create some kind of measuring tool and ability to gauge where you're at in terms of your closeness with that person. And I did the same thing. I actually remember having a conversation like this with my mom many years ago, where she and I both rated our relationship and closeness with each other on a scale of 1 to 10, and then we shared our number with each other, and we had a really vulnerable conversation about what we thought we needed to add into our relationship for us to become closer. And let me tell you, it was really hard to have that conversation because it was so uncomfortable. It was so uncomfortable to look my mom in the eyes and tell her that I thought our relationship was a 6 out of a 10, and she thought it was, a 7 out of 10, and to have us like get real about what we were not bringing to the table that was creating distance between us. And this is what I think 99.9% of the people listening are scared of, is vulnerability. Once again, like this is like the core thing that I want to teach on my social media. If you have a sibling that you're not close to and you want to be close to them, like there's even an inkling in you of pain because you're disconnected from them, it is 100% up to you to start a conversation. It does take 2 to tango, but if you aren't the one to start the conversation, you might be waiting the rest of your life until you don't have the opportunity to become closer with your sister or sibling. And there's a lot of you out there who don't have a relationship with your sibling, and it pains you inside, even to a small degree. But it's that fear of, oh my God, what is my sister gonna think of me? And what if she rejects me? What if she doesn't wanna be close to me? That's the fear that keeps people from having these vulnerable, real, authentic conversations to try to create closeness. And it's true that your sibling might actually not wanna develop a closer relationship with you. And if that is the case, you have to learn not to take that personally and not to create meaning from that and decide that you're unlovable or unworthy or unforgivable or a whole list of things that you might think, But if your sibling does want to have a relationship with you, then that's the start of creating something beautiful together that maybe you never thought was possible. But you gotta be the one. You gotta take the first step. Don't wait for your sibling to come to you and hope that your sibling will one day want to connect with you and just call you up randomly. No, you pick up the phone and make the call, right?
Right. Actually, it made me think of when we went to
see Jay Shetty speak.
Yeah, when we went to see
Jay Shetty is like a life coach, speaker. He talks about relationships a lot. So he went on tour with his book about love.
Yeah, so when you talked about that, it made me think of, I don't remember exactly, but there was a moment in the talk where he was saying, who is someone in your life that, you had a close relationship with, but don't anymore, or someone that you haven't talked to in a long time. And he brought, I think, 2 people up on stage and had them make that phone call to that person that they hadn't talked to for whatever reason, whether it was, the relationship ended in a bad way, or just time went by, or there's just some type of disconnection. And I think those people shared like either it was a fond memory or something they were thankful for, or just said, hey, I know it's been a while, I'm thinking of you, how are you? And it was just like a reminder, when you hear that person on the other side, just be so touched by that one phone call of, wow, like that moment of reconnecting, how at any point, we can choose to do that with anyone in our life, whether it's our sibling or any person that we love or had a relationship or haven't talked to in a while or thought about, but didn't let them know. It's a good reminder.
Yeah, it's really true. Like I try to put myself in that person's shoes who is disconnected from their sibling. And my sister and I have an older brother too, and I didn't grow up with my brother. Again, he was 15 years older than me. So when I was like 10, he was already 25 and done with college, living somewhere else. So I didn't grow up being especially close to him. And I've had to take the initiative to create a relationship with him as I've gotten older. And there were times that I sometimes felt like, oh, you know, maybe one day, right? But then I woke up just before I went abroad for 4 months and I was like, if I thought really deeply into this, I would live with major regret if I wasn't the one reaching out to my brother and I wasn't the one taking the initiative to have a closer bond. And the same can be applied to all your relationships in your life, you know? If anything, I'm happy that I did everything that I could to improve my relationships and deepen my connections. So if you're that someone that is scared to go to your sibling that you're disconnected to, and you're scared to see if they want to hang out with you or to just start talking on a more day-to-day basis or whatever it is that your goal is, I just want you to ask yourself, like, if years went by, or, you know, if tomorrow was not promised, we'll get a little dark here, would you live with some regret for not being the one to pick up the phone and call your sister? Like, would you be okay with knowing that you didn't do what you could to try and get closer with your sibling? And I feel like that question answers everything for me. And again, it's not just for sisters. This is for anyone in your life. Yeah. We have this tendency to wait and just hope that things will change. Yeah. Stop hoping. You have to put in the work. It's scary, it's vulnerable as hell, but just like Brené Brown says, vulnerability is the birthplace of connection. It's the birthplace of everything we're hungry for. So that little whisper you hear about, you know, wanting to have a deeper bond with your sibling, you gotta listen to that, and then you gotta inch towards that, as painful as that might be.
Yeah, I think that's a reminder that in life, like, if you don't ask or don't take the risk, then the answer, it will always just be no, or it will always stay the same. But if you take that risk to, you know, ask someone for something or ask them, it can be anything, then there's a possibility of there being a yes, or there's a possibility of there being an opening of something being different. But without taking that risk or that first step or opening up that conversation or saying, like, I'm sorry if I've hurt you in any way, like, or what can we do to make this relationship better, or is there anything I can do for you? Hey, I was thinking of you. Whatever it is, then there's an opportunity for something to be different. But without that, it stays the same.
Exactly. You never know until you're actually in it and you're actually taking the risk. That's what you're saying. And also just thinking about, like, times that we had that were difficult, I think what comes to mind for me is when you went through your divorce. And obviously, even though I wasn't the one going through divorce, divorces shake things up in family and they affect every single member of a family. Sure. And I don't know what it was like to be in the position that you were in when you were going through your divorce. But your divorce did affect me when I was like 21. And there were a lot of complexities and really hard times that we went through as a family. But I remember going through a really difficult time just accepting some of the choices that you made around your divorce. And I'm not going to go into specifics about what that was just for privacy reasons, but I actually remember being so upset about things that were going on in your divorce. And instead of just like coming to you and just like freaking out about all these emotions that I was dealing with and my opinions and perspectives on everything, I just wrote you a letter, and I just poured my heart and soul into this letter, and I brought it to your house, and then I went on with my night. And I remember you sent me a text message like that night or the next day, and you were crying. You sent me a picture and you said that was the most beautiful letter you've ever written me, and you apologized, and you said your piece, whatever it was. And I really appreciated that, like, you didn't get upset or mad at me for being angry at you during your own divorce. Meanwhile, you're like sinking and struggling and you're underwater, and like you still had the capacity to hold space for what I was going through. And it's not about me at all, but what I'm saying is, like, in a family, you're inevitably affected by your siblings' choices and by the way they live their life. You are. And I think it's really important to learn how to deal with those difficult situations when they arise. And if you're the person that's affected by your sibling, it is your responsibility to communicate it in a way that the person will be willing to receive it, in a way where the person doesn't have to defend themselves or put walls up or, be extremely hurt. And I did my best to communicate well in that letter because I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted to find understanding. And as the person who's on the receiving end, like receiving feedback from your sibling or hearing what you unintentionally did or said that hurt your sibling, you have to let your walls and guards down and stop defending yourself, not take it personally, and also be able to be civil and try to put yourself in the shoes of your sibling and understand, the role or things that you do that might impact them. Yeah. The way that you did when you got my letter. You were just so understanding of it.
Sure, yeah. I didn't think of that until you mentioned it, but I do remember that. And that's what I appreciate about our relationship and the ability to just be real and honest with each other and not holding things in and letting things linger and build up. But that way we can just move forward and, work through those times.
Yeah, I just want people to know, though we have an age gap, we surely have gone through really hard times together. Sure. As a family and just, as the two of us as well. Yeah. And I don't think any sibling is exempt from going through those times. Yeah. But what we really care deeply about is communicating, like you said, when those hard times arise, and communicating in a way where we can see each other, understand each other, hear each other out, and always come from a genuine place of love. Right. Sometimes it's easy to get really caught up in the nitty-gritty of fights, and a lot of times whatever you're fighting about is not the actual fight. That's just the surface. A lot of times what you're really fighting about is a much deeper issue that might even come from childhood, that might even come from the fact that you're the oldest or the middle child or the youngest, or, the way that your parents treated you versus the way your parents treated your sibling. There's so many things from the past that intervene with the present. And one thing we've always been good at is not rehashing the past over and over again in the present, which is what a lot of people do in the fight. They take their past and they hold these different memories against their sibling or against the people in their life, and they want to carry that pain with them. And it's just not fair. Everybody deserves a blank slate. Everybody, in my opinion, deserves a second chance. I don't think anyone's just out to get you, out to hurt you, and hates you and wants to cause harm. And the people who do are people who are truly hurt inside and are experiencing so much pain that they probably don't have an outlet for. And, that's a whole nother topic that we won't get into. But all I'm saying is, in a sibling relationship and any relationship, both people have to see their responsibility in conflict and in hurt.
And be willing to want it, to be open to, taking responsibility or apologizing or changing certain aspects that, are hurtful. And some people aren't able to do that. And some relationships are better off not being, connected, even if it is family, because they can be so detrimental to a person. But so everyone's situation is unique, and you have to also, trust yourself and, what you want to allow in your space or the relationships that are okay for you. And I just feel thankful that we have, the relationship that we have.
That's really true. Not every family member wants to be close with their sibling or their parent. And, you know, nobody's saying that you have to. You really don't. Like, I feel very privileged to genuinely, like, love my family, and I always want to have a deeper connection with my siblings and my parents, but some people do not want that closeness for varying reasons. Some people really do have a lot of toxicity around them. And it's, in that case, it can be a lot safer and healthier to have boundaries, you know? Like, no two situations are the same. Like, let's be really clear about that. But I do think that when you refuse to look at yourself and you refuse to look at your shortcomings, flaws, areas of growth, whatever word you want to get it, you miss out on the biggest learning and growth opportunity that will only benefit you in all other areas of your life.
Absolutely.
And like, the biggest thing when it comes to all relationships, the biggest like thing that I feel like creates so much contention and conflict is just believing that everybody has to be exactly like you. You know, if you have a sibling that's introverted and more shy, don't force your sibling to be extroverted and social and talkative. Like, allow them to be the person that they are. If that's something they want, trust that they are going to discover and take action on that when they are ready and when they want to. And even for parents, parents need to learn to stop projecting their wants onto their kids, because that happens all the time. Parents want their kids to be more tough. Parents want their kids to be more athletic. They want their kids to be more social, more, you know, like willing to take risks on the playground, whatever it is. But there's a huge mistake in that. And I listen to Dr. Shafali. She's the parenting expert nowadays. Like, she says children are not a canvas for parents to paint on. Like, parents don't get to decide how their kids are going to turn out. Kids get to come into themselves the way they're meant to. And I apply that to sibling relationships, friendships, every single human being in my life. Nobody is a canvas for me to paint on. I don't get to decide how you should be. I don't get to say that if only you were X, Y, and Z, things would be easier for you, or you'd be happier in life. You'd be more successful if only you did this more, if only you stopped being this way. And I really believe that that's where a lot of people go wrong, is they want to impose what they think is the best for the other person. And it's because that fits their idea of what's right, what's the best, what's acceptable, what's okay in society. And I think, you know, for all of you listening, examine that for yourself. What is it that you believe people have to do? What is it that you think they need to be like in order to receive love, in order to be happier in their life, in order to find peace? And fully let go of your expectations that they need to live up to that, because it's so unfair. Truly, like, you know, the saying, like, you know, kind of like stay in your own lane, as hard as it is to say, like, I think there's a lot of truth to that. Of course, if your sibling or anyone comes to you for advice or wants you to help guide them, then sure, you know, you might impose your advice onto them. But if it's unwarranted and it's just your own resistance that you're dealing with about your sibling, you really have to work on yourself to come to a place of full acceptance of your sibling for who they are and how they are.
I agree. Very well said, Gina.
Nothing to add to that?
I think you said it all.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think that, you know, I had somebody send an anonymous question that, what do you do when you have a sibling that's just not as motivated as you are, or that's not as extroverted as you are? I don't think you do anything unless they're coming to you and saying to you that they want to change and they want your help. Yeah. Because if anything, how do you think your sibling will feel if they constantly feel like they have to be different to feel love from you, or that they might think that they need fixing, that something's wrong with them? Oftentimes it's not even what you say or do, it's an energy that you bring. You know, do you have a sibling that constantly feeds you advice that has you think that you're not good enough? And if so, tell your sibling, come forward with your truth, be vulnerable, do it in a way that they'll be able to be receptive to. But yeah, like just what I'm getting at is do not think that your sibling needs to be the same as you.
Yeah.
I don't care if you think it's better that they're more organized or better that they're more on top of their shit, that they're tougher or less sensitive or more outgoing. I don't care. Who said that that's the right way to be? Who said that's the best way to be? Who said that's the way to be that works for them and their path in life? Everybody's on their own journey. And the topic of comparison, which is a major thing for everybody, I would say, this is really what you need to remember. Everybody is on their own journey and path that is specific to them. The goal is not to get everybody to walk your same path. The goal is actually to like take a look at their path and be curious about their path and actually see what you can learn from their path. See what they can learn from your path and leave it at that.
Yeah.
That creates harmony, peace. Like, don't fight who your siblings are. Accept them for who they are.
Yeah, and I think another great, I don't know if you want to call it a tool or perspective, but to find the things that you appreciate or that you're thankful for about them versus, oh, here they go again, or, you know, focusing on what you don't like or what's not working or the struggles, but taking a moment to like maybe reflect on, you know, their effort or something you appreciate about them or you're thankful for or a great memory you had. It just can shift your perspective or your feeling into, you know, being grateful for that person in your life versus being judgmental or upset or frustrated or wanting to change them. Just having that acceptance and seeing, you know, the greatness in that person.
Absolutely. As much as our siblings annoy us, they also bring something to the table that maybe we're not so great at bringing to the table. And we got to recognize that and as often as possible, express our appreciation to them, you know? I mean, I could definitely get better at giving you words of affirmation, which is your love language and my love language. And somebody even talked to us about how they struggle with having a different love language as their sibling. And by the way, if you don't know what I'm talking about, there's something called the 5 love languages. You can take a quiz online to discover what yours is. Everybody has a primary love language, which is the way they show and like to receive love. It could be physical touch, acts of service, words of affirmation, quality time, or gift giving. And go find out what your sibling's love language is. Go find out what kind of love they'd be most receptive to. Because sometimes your sibling doesn't feel loved when you cook them dinner. Sometimes what they really want to hear is, you mean so much to me because when I need you, you always pick up the phone. And when I feel sad, you're always my shoulder to cry on. Figure out how your sibling likes to be loved by you and then show love to them in that way. I think that if you struggle to like connect with your sibling on that level, the best thing you can do is actually ask them like, what can I do or how can I be to make you feel appreciated and loved by me? How else are you going to learn and find that out if you don't just ask the question? Why sit there and wonder, you know, does my sibling really know I love them? Does my sibling feel close to me? Pick up the phone and ask them. Find out, you know, how you can appreciate each other more in your life and find ways to deepen your bond through just having deeper conversation with them, even though it's scary. If you communicate in different styles, which is, you know, a problem in a lot of relationships, not just for siblings. Yeah. That's also something to explore is like, what is it about your communication styles that, you know, makes you guys different and how can you work together to figure out like a happy medium? That's, you know, that's something that probably requires a little more digging and time and research and effort. But I think that's what it takes to understand someone is it does take time and energy and effort and understanding and sometimes arguments to be able to get each other more.
Sure.
Yeah, so on the topic of forgiveness, just going back to what we said earlier, if you're the sibling that was hurt by your sibling, find a place in your heart to ask yourself, what might they have been going through just in their own world apart from me? Sure, I might have caused them a lot of, hurt or chaos or fights or whatever, but they also might have been going through something just individually that maybe you don't know about. Maybe they went through something in school or with your parents, whatever it is. Like, you don't always see everything, even when you grow up in the same house. Every kid has different expectations placed on them, different pressure. And so that plays a role too in like sibling dynamics and fights. And I know growing up, because my siblings are so much older than me, I never got into fights with my siblings. But I had lots of friends who had little siblings, and I saw the fights, let me tell you. And so, I have a little different of a perspective because I didn't go through that necessarily, but I do believe that it's important to just like recognize what happened in the past, and also be able to move on from that and be able to rewrite a new story with each other, not relive the same old story from the past.
Yeah, that's true.
If you got to go to therapy, go to therapy. I've gone to therapy about my sister at times. She's gone to therapy. There's nothing wrong.
We've gone together.
We've gone together. There's nothing
We've done a lot of different things.
Yeah.
To improve and work on our relationship or to be better in life.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with seeking counsel outside of you. There's mediators if you get in conflicts with your siblings and you need a neutral third party. There's so many resources out there. But, I had somebody send an anonymous message to Allie and I when we opened up the floor for people to tell us about their sibling dynamic, and I had somebody that said that they lost both of their sisters, and their advice would be to really cherish the bond that you have with your sister. So if we're gonna, conclude this podcast, I would definitely leave it at that, and we'll end on a happy note by sharing like a funny memory that you and I have together. But certainly reflect on what Allie said earlier. What's one thing that you really appreciate about your sibling? And we suggest that at the end of this podcast, you actually call or text your sibling or send a voice note or a video and directly tell your sibling what they mean to you.
And I'll go first.
Okay.
Shayna. Well, I always wanted a sister like you. I always wanted a baby and wanted someone to share my life with and to be able to dress up and go shopping for and go to concerts together. And I've been so lucky to have that with you. It's been an incredible journey up until this point. I hope we have a lot of lifetime left together, and I appreciate just like how you've grown and changed and who you are in general. Like, you're loving and caring and thoughtful, and you're the best aunt to the kids, and they love you. You bring that structure and that accountability that I'm not so great at, but you're a lot of fun too, and you're giving of your time, and you're generous, and your friends love you. You're just a very warm, happy, you've always been driven. I think it's incredible what you've created with your page and talking to women and opening up these kinds of more vulnerable, deep conversations. And I think it's important because we all have relationships that we want to have, to be better. And I'm thankful just for how much we've been able to grow and learn from each other and experience life. And you're always down to go get ice cream or go get good food, and we share like those things that we love, and music and concerts and singing in the car and getting ready together. Like, I cherish those times with you, and I think you're a beautiful, beautiful woman, and I know you deserve everything wonderful in life, and a partner And I'm excited to see what you create and what you do next. And I'm inspired by how you just get up on stage and talk to people or get up in front of like huge crowds. And you've just become so confident. And I love how like honest you are. Like you're just a real, genuine person. And people can relate to that. And people understand. They appreciate that about you. And I certainly do. And, you know, you've been just that joy in our life since you came into the world. And like with your big blue eyes and, you know, you just were always very funny and, you know, you always were very creative in all the things that you did. And I always look forward to being around you and being with you. And I'm so thankful that you live a few minutes away from me and that my kids get to have an aunt like you. We're very lucky. I appreciate you very much.
Oh, thanks, Al. I received that for sure, and I obviously feel the same way. For me, it was so different growing up because I felt like I was treated like an absolute princess. You would come home from TJ Maxx and Marshall's with bags of clothes. You would force me to try everything on, knowing I hated fashion and shopping, and it drove me crazy, but you always were thinking of me. When I remember you would like throw me into the shower and I'd come out and you would pour this Johnson & Johnson baby powder all over me, which now we know is cancerous. But like you always took care of me and you really were like a parent to me when mom and dad weren't there. But beyond that, you always loved me. Like just, I have all these memories of you just cuddling me and us having sleepovers all the time. And you just, you know, like always being kind and generous. And when I moved to Las Vegas from Connecticut, you let me live with you for months and you drove me to school. I didn't have a bus, it was a private school. You drove me to school and picked me up, fed me dinner before mom and dad had even moved here. Like you were my mom in that time when I had just moved to a new city with no friends. You just took on that role so well. And in many ways, you still look after me by cooking me meals and driving me places, and I feel so blessed. And I do have a really funny memory when you took me to my first concert, which was the Cheetah Girls, and Allie literally drove the two of us all the way to like some city in New York from our hometown in Connecticut. And when the concert ended, it was pitch black and laid out, and Allie literally got us lost. We had no cell phones back then. We had the GPS map quest that you had to print out, and we somehow got way off track from the printed paper, and Allie had like a panic attack in the car, and I was like 8 or 9, and literally she called the cops. And so it was me, Allie, she was sobbing, the cop was at our car and he was helping us get home. Anyway, such a fun night, turned into a total disaster, but it was so funny looking back now. Anyway, Al, I appreciate you for your empathy, the way that you forgive people so easily, the way that you love unconditionally, the way that you never gossip or talk poorly of anyone, even the people who have hurt you most, the way that you're carefree and fun and lighthearted and so generous and kind, and you're the first person to take the shirt off your back and give it to someone else, even when you have nothing, which says so much about who you are. Like when you're so limited on resources and money and even like energy and stamina, you're the first to give love and money and donations and shelter and food to whoever doesn't have it. It's like, it's the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my life. But I love you for always being there for me and for just creating so many wonderful memories that I'll forever keep close to my heart, for making me an aunt, which is the biggest blessing ever, but for always just meeting me with kindness, love, and understanding.
I love you.
I love you so much, Al.
I love you so much. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching, everyone.